The case manager received a call from Ms. Collins from foster parent support agency Georgia Youth Advocacy Program. She informed the case manager that Chris Thomas and Chris Butts were involved in an armed robbery at a pawn shop. The two other young men involved were older. The owner of the pawn shop was shot in the shoulder. Chris Thomas and Chris Butts were apprehended by police. Police believed the gun belonged to one of the older suspects. Thomas and Butts were taken to Regional Youth Detention Center and were charged with armed robbery and assault. Both boys were charged as adults under the Senate Bill 440 law.
You are all charged with the offense of armed robbery. The indictment says that on the 4th of January 1999, with the intent to commit theft, you took 3 .38 caliber revolvers, 1 Glock 9mm semi-automatic handgun, 1 Paris 9mm handgun, and 1 TZ 9mm semi-automatic handgun, which was property of A. Awesome Jewelry and Pawn Shop, and took from the immediate presence of William Lake by use of a certain handgun as an offensive weapon. You are also charged with aggravated assault.
It appeared that neither Mr. Thomas nor Mr. Butts wielded any weapon during the course of this armed robbery, other than I think one of the young men took some weapons out of the gun case and removed them from the store. But at no time did either one of these two young men brandish a weapon in a threatening manner towards anyone inside of that store. I think a fair degree of culpability in this case is much less than the others involved. Christopher Thomas's parents are serving time in the Georgia penal system for drug convictions. He's been in 30 different foster placements over the course of his life. He's been basically abandoned by his parents and grandparents.
Court, there are several people here, but in court is his mother, and I think she would like to address the court.
I'm just too full. I'll let my mom. I'm just too full right now.
Okay, yes ma'am.
I'm Doris McCain. I would like to talk for all three of us, my grandchildren. They have never been in kind of trouble at all. I've never known them to be bad at home. But to be influenced by others, with this man older than them, that will influence children to do things they would not normally do. The only thing I can stand here and ask you is to please be lenient on them, because they really don't understand what they're doing here today.
Well, I hope they understand. Christopher Thomas, terroristic threats and acts, disrupting public school, giving false name and information to the police.
Notes on Chris's behavior written by his teachers over the years read, Chris has extreme difficulty obeying rules, following directions, working with peers, and respecting adults. Talks too much other peers by picking on them and talking, does not hit like he did at first, likes to tattle, but does not complain about any work. Chris was placed in the emotional/behavioral disorder program at Northside on a diagnostic placement beginning March 20th, 1995, and a few years later, in 1998, was later placed at The Bridge, a behavioral therapy facility. The school resource officer at Mary Acres Middle School testified that Chris was sent to the office for cursing in Ms. Davis's classroom, causing a disruption. Chris left the classroom without permission. When the officer found him in the hall, he gave a false name, Jarvis Thomas, to the officer. When the officer tried to get Chris in the office, he cursed the officer loudly in the hall. After finally getting Chris into the office, school principal Glass came in the room. Chris threatened to kill Principal Glass and the officer. Following this event, Chris was given a 90-day boot camp sentence and returned to the Bridge on March 30th, but his placement was terminated April 15th due to Chris's verbal and physical aggression. A letter to the case manager from the Bridge stated, Chris is on his way to a downward spiral fast, behavior deteriorating quickly. Boot camp was no help.
I also have a couple of testimonial letters that have been written by mentors of Mr. Thomas that I would like to present, and I have a witness from the Department of Children's Services.
All right, I'd like to hear from her. Hi, how are you doing? Tell us who you are.
My name is Cynthia Poole with the Baldwin County Department of Family and Children's Services.
Yes, ma'am.
Just briefly, Chris Thomas has basically been in foster care about maybe 15, he's been in at least, 15 places within the last 12 years. He first entered care on September 9th, 1987, when he was 2 years old, and this was due to severe neglect, inadequate care, and lack of supervision by his parents and some abandonment. He has a diagnosis as ADHD with psychosocial stressors, and he has a learning disability. He's been placed on several medications to assist his behavior.
Christopher displays symptoms of ADHD and a reading disability. There was no evidence of affective disturbance nor psychosis. His problems appear related to a deficit in impulse control coupled with poor family role models.
I was standing at work. I had my 2 children and my wife visiting me at the time. They came in without any thought. My 2 children were standing in front of the store. My wife was standing next to me and I had a customer. He just walked up, pulled that gun, pulled the trigger. He didn't say a word, didn't say anything, didn't have a chance for nothing.
Where did he hit you?
Right here. He busted, broke my cervical, broke my shoulder bone. This will never heal. It shattered the bone. And I mean, I still wake up at night in a cold sweat, hearing a loud bang. And my daughter cannot sleep. It's quite vivid. She's only 11 years old and it literally tore that poor child up.
I probably worry about these kinds of cases more than any that I have, where you've got especially children, but in Deprived, there's no doubt about it, pushed around, abused, neglected most of their lives, at least these 2 certainly. Not that schooling hasn't helped, acting in a terribly wrong way, which resulted in this man and his family suffering the most harrowing and horrendous experience of their lives. You have 2 young children seeing their father shot down in cold blood right in front of them. The gentleman himself being shot. An inch or 2 lower, an inch or 2 over, and it's a murder case. Not an aggravated assault case. It's arguably a death penalty case. Just a millimeter. An artery cut rather than a bone shattered and he's gone. I gotta take that into consideration. So I've got to pass sentence here. For Mr. Thomas, I'm going to sentence you to 20 years on the armed robbery, 20 years on the aggravated assault consecutively. Mr. Bentley, unfortunately you pulled the trigger, resulting in this man's injuries and psychological damage to his family and children, which will probably be lifelong. I'm going to sentence you to life imprisonment on the armed robbery, 20 years consecutive for aggravated assault, 5 years consecutive for the possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. If you think this sentence is unfair, harsh, too much time, inappropriate in any way, your lawyers or you can file a request with the clerk of the court within the next 30 days to have your sentence reviewed by a 3-judge panel. They can reduce your sentence, but they do not have the power to increase it.